Hello and welcome back to my 10 favorite people. Hope you're doing well. I'm incredibly excited for today's video because even with all of the doom and gloom out there right now, everything is lining up perfectly for Bitcoin here, and I truly believe the future looks bright. For one, Bitcoin is still holding our major support area. We have the 50-week moving average here, which was support in 2024, 2023, and twice in 2021. We're also still above our March 2024 swing high. And so far this cycle, Bitcoin has never gone back below a previous swing high. And we also finally completely filled the Bitcoin CME gap. Now, I know these tend to be memes, and even though we've been talking about it for months, we didn't know if it would get filled in a future bear market after a blow off top, or if Bitcoin was going to come down and fill the CME gap before its next rally higher. So it's nice to see that it finally got filled, and we don't have to wonder if a partial fill was sufficient or if we needed to see the complete CME gap fill before Bitcoin could continue its rally higher. And we knew there was a high likelihood of this CME gap getting filled because we've seen every single gap in the past 5 years get filled eventually. So it's nice to see that we can finally put that behind us. So for me, it's very easy to be bullish at support because the default assumption should always be that support will hold, the same way the default assumption at resistance should be that resistance will continue to hold. And if we do end up seeing that invalidation, we can talk about different outcomes. But as of right now, I am optimistic we will see higher prices because we are sitting at major support. And it's great to see that this major support area retest is coinciding with the record low market sentiment, just like we saw at the August 2024 bottom and just like we saw at the September 2023 one. But crazy enough, sentiment today with Bitcoin trading above 80,000 is worse than the sentiment we saw when Bitcoin bottomed at 50K. And it's even worse than the sentiment we saw when Bitcoin found its bottom in September of 2023 at 25K. And I wrote all about this in Monday's free weekly report that I always link in the video description. And I know a lot of newer people that have come across this channel assume that I'm a permabull who's always optimistic and expecting higher prices. But this is the free weekly report that I wrote in December 9th when Bitcoin first broke above 100K. And it was called Fearful When Others Are Greedy. And we talked about market sentiment and open interest being historically elevated while global liquidity was going down. And in the screenshot from where we talked about sentiment, you can see that Bitcoin had been in extreme greed for quite a while. We spent 4 weeks up there. We talked about market participants taking high levels of risk and leverage as they watch their portfolio increase week after week. And we know that bull markets are full of leverage washouts and sudden corrections, and it would not surprise me to see one soon. And I didn't say that at the time because I have a crystal ball or because I knew Trump was going to come out swinging with tariffs and spook traditional markets, which would send Bitcoin lower. I just knew that this is how the cyclicality of markets plays out. And when we're in extreme greed, eventually we run out of buyers and price corrects. The same way that now that we're in extreme fear, I'm saying that eventually there's going to be mean reversion and we can't stay in extreme fear forever because eventually we run out of sellers. But the reason why this is easier said than done is because every time the market is in extreme greed, everything looks perfect and everybody on YouTube and Twitter is talking about higher and higher price targets. If you have any type of concerns, people just tell you that you don't understand strategic reserves and you don't understand game theory and how the US government is going to start buying billions of dollars of Bitcoin and then every other country is going to follow suit. And Saylor has cracked the code and found an infinite money glitch so that MicroStrategy and Bitcoin will go up together hand in hand and we will never see a correction again. The same way today, if you share anything optimistic, people are telling you you don't understand tariffs and you don't understand that we're on the verge of a global recession that is going to send markets 50 to 80% lower. We put in the global top for Bitcoin and we will never trade above 100K again because Trump and Secretary of the Treasury Bessent want to nuke the economy and force Powell to pivot. So there's no way markets can go up because they have to go a lot lower. And, people are waiting to buy Bitcoin at 50K, 30K, 20K because they've sold everything and they're convinced we're entering a huge recession. And maybe some of those people end up being right, but what I would prefer to rely on is that whenever the market is overly greedy, it's time to be cautious and take some profits. And whenever the market feels overly fearful, it's time to zoom out and buy some dips if you're interested in adding to your positions. And it really helps when we're sitting at major support and dealing with record low sentiment and extreme fear when the global liquidity data is telling us that Bitcoin should be going higher soon. I mean, look at this incredible increase we've seen in the global liquidity index over the past few weeks, just like we saw in July and August of 2024, just like we saw in November and December of 2023, and just like we saw in late 2022. But everybody ignores it every single time because price action isn't following it in the short term. And now I know new people are thinking to themselves, that's great and all, but why didn't anybody tell me when global liquidity was going down and I was piling my net worth into meme coins while Bitcoin was above 100K? But that's exactly what we talked about in that exact same December 10th weekly report. We talked about how global liquidity had been in a downtrend for weeks and it would likely impact Bitcoin within the next 2 weeks or so, and how I believed global liquidity was the main driver for Bitcoin on larger, more macro timeframes. And now that global liquidity has been increasing aggressively over the past few weeks, I believe it's only a matter of time before Bitcoin follows suit, just like Bitcoin eventually priced in the global liquidity downtrend we were talking about in December. And why have we been seeing this increase in the global liquidity index? It's because of the steep drop in the DXY, and that's because the market has been pricing in more and more rate cuts. Now that we have all of this tariff drama and what Trump and Bessent are doing, we also have cooling inflation finally after this morning's CPI print. The expectation was 3.2%. The actual number that came in was 3.1. And this is the first time we've broken out of this kind of sideways range that we've been in since about June of 2024. So this gives the Fed a little bit more room if they do want to take their foot off the gas a little bit, especially when you combine this with all the federal layoffs we've been seeing and the slowly weakening unemployment rate. And if you would have told me that the S&P 500 was going to drop 10% in just 4 weeks, I would have assumed Bitcoin would drop something like 30 or 40% during that time period. But we're actually holding up quite well given all of the macro uncertainty and weakness that we've seen in the S&P 500, especially when you combine that with all of the ETF outflows that we've been seeing. So if anything, I'm seeing relative strength for Bitcoin here compared to how we would normally expect it to perform during this type of macro uncertainty. But it is a risk asset, so it does follow the S&P 500. When investors are concerned about risk assets, they sell them all indiscriminately. They don't really differentiate on whether it's a stock or whether it's Bitcoin. When the S&P 500 goes down, investors tend to sell Bitcoin as well. As for my portfolio, I did deploy some more cash across my positions on Monday. A lot of this cash is from profit taking we did earlier in the year when Bitcoin was above 100,000, because as I look at the current backdrop and look forward, I see Bitcoin sitting at major support. I see market sentiment extremely fearful, and I see global liquidity rising. I can't help but buy the dip a little bit with those profits and prepare for the next move higher, which is my base case. The same way it was easy to take profits when Bitcoin was at resistance, market sentiment was extremely greedy, and global liquidity was going down. And I am currently building a program/community where I can explain things in a much more organized and structured way, like my portfolio management system and exactly how I decide to take profits and when I decide to accumulate, mental frameworks I use to instill good habits, and common mistakes I have made and see investors making over and over again. I'm offering early bird pricing while I build it out. If it's not something you're into, I completely understand, and I hope you continue to get value from the videos. And speaking of value, we still have Bitcoin sitting in the dead center of our fair value region. It's amazing how risk assets are the only things that people love to buy when they're expensive or full price, but hate to buy and instead would rather sell when they are on a sale. This cheap region would be the load the boat area for me. I will take profits once again if we re-enter the expensive region, and I would be taking very, very heavy profits if we end up seeing this very expensive region at some point in 2025. But we don't have to worry about profits now that we are talking about Ethereum. It just fell back into its old range from 2022 and 2023. It's trading below the psychological 2K number, which was our previous range high. We really don't want to be spending a lot of time here. We really want to see a quick reclaim, but this thing just continues to go down. And until we actually see a reversal in Bitcoin, I just think Ethereum will continue doing what it's been doing, which is underperform Bitcoin during this cycle so far. I like where Ethereum Bitcoin is, so I'm not interested in selling my Ethereum because I don't think it can go down that much more against Bitcoin. But obviously we need to see some Bitcoin strength come back into this market if Ethereum is going to turn around. And ideally we need some type of new narrative for Ethereum, like something new with stable coins or something new with DeFi or something with the fees or layer twos or maybe making it faster. I mean, I do have my Ethereum bet hedged with Solana, which is the second most popular smart contract platform. So as of right now, I do believe one of the two will be the winner. Solana against Bitcoin doesn't look that great as well, but it's getting very close to its December 2023 lows, which also coincide nicely with its 200-week moving average. So I don't know if we're going to get that low, but I would love to add at those prices. But a lot of that is going to depend on Bitcoin's price action. So we're going to have to wait and see if the 100-week moving average was enough or if we need to see the 200-week before finding our bottom. But both Solana USD and Solana versus Bitcoin look overdue for a bounce. So we'll see what happens for Bitcoin. As of right now, we're kind of in no man's land. We're trading below the range we were just in, but we're still above our old range from last year. So ideally, we see a reclaim sooner rather than later. But as of right now, we're just chopping in no man's land, trying to hold that 50-week moving average. So we'll see what happens. A lot of that is going to depend on the S&P 500. It looks overdue for a bounce to me. I mean, this is the S&P 500, not a meme coin, so you would expect bounces along the way. And this has been a very aggressive sell-off over the past few weeks, which again actually makes me impressed with how well Bitcoin has held up during that S&P 500 sell-off. But as we look forward, the federal government is still running huge deficits. And if we do see some real economic weakness or some real growth scares, I think that deficit is only going to increase, which is going to further increase that trend we've seen over the past 2 to 3 decades of federal deficits getting larger and larger. And larger deficits mean more national debt. More national debt means more money supply expansion and currency debasement, which is bullish for our risk assets like the S&P 500 and Bitcoin in the long term. But as always, let me know what you expect. Will Bitcoin visit that unlikely region, or will we hold support here in this green possible area? I think we hold the possible area, but I will happily adjust if that changes. As always, thank you so much for the support on the recent videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.